The air crackled with the kind of tension that makes your skin crawl, the kind where a single wrong move could end in blood. Officer Marcus Reed stood frozen, his hands raised, staring down the barrel of a Glock held by someone who was supposed to be his ally. It was supposed to be a routine patrol in the heart of Crestwood, a city where the lines between right and wrong blurred like ink in the rain. Marcus, a 10-year veteran of the force, had seen it all: drug busts, bar fights, and the occasional drunk who thought he could outrun a squad car. But nothing prepared him for this. Officer Sarah Klein, a rookie with a chip on her shoulder, pointing her service weapon at his chest. Her eyes were wild, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and authority. "Don't move, or I swear I'll shoot," she barked, her finger hovering too close to the trigger. Marcus kept his hands steady, his heart pounding but his voice calm. "Sarah, it's me, Officer Reed. Badge number 4729. Put the gun down." He could see the doubt flickering in her eyes, but the gun didn't waver. The alley was dark, the only light coming from a flickering street lamp that cast long shadows on the cracked pavement. A civilian, a young woman named Lila Carter, stood a few feet away, her phone shaking in her hands as she recorded the scene, her breath hitching in panic. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was a spark in a powder keg, a moment where years of systemic rot and unspoken biases collided. Crestwood was a city divided neighborhoods carved up by race, wealth, and mistrust. Marcus, a black man born and raised in the city's roughest district, had joined the force to bridge that gap. He'd earned his badge through grit, sacrifice, and a stubborn belief that he could make a difference. Sarah, on the other hand, was new blood, fresh from the academy, her worldview shaped by whispers of us versus them, and a steady diet of fear disguised as training. The call had come in 20 minutes earlier, a report of a suspicious figure near the old warehouse district. Marcus had been first on the scene, his radio crackling with static as he reported his position. He'd been checking the perimeter, his flashlight cutting through the dusk, when Sarah's cruiser screeched to a stop behind him. She jumped out, gun already drawn, shouting commands before he could even turn around. "Hands up! Now!" she'd yelled, her voice echoing off the brick walls. Marcus had complied, slowly raising his hands, his badge clearly visible on his uniform. But Sarah didn't see a fellow officer. She saw a black man in a dark alley, and in that split second, her training, her instincts kicked in. To her, he was a threat, not a colleague. And now, here they were, locked in a standoff that could end in tragedy. "Sarah, look at my badge," Marcus said again, his voice steady but laced with urgency. "I'm on your side. You're making a mistake." He could feel the weight of every moment he'd faced like this before, not with a gun pointed at him, but with the subtle slights, the sideways glances, the assumptions that followed him like a shadow. The time a shop owner called the cops on him while he was off duty, buying milk. The time a sergeant questioned his paperwork 3 times over, while his white partner's was waved through. The time a kid on the street asked why he'd sold out to wear the badge. Each moment had chipped away at him, but he'd kept going, believing the system could change. Sarah's hands shook, the gun wobbling slightly. "You don't get to tell me what to do," she snapped, her voice cracking. "I saw you lurking here, no radio call, no backup. What the hell are you doing?" Her words were sharp, but there was fear behind them, fear of the unknown, fear of being wrong, fear of losing control. Marcus saw it in her eyes, the way they darted from his face to his badge, as if she couldn't reconcile the two. Lila, the bystander, took a step forward, her phone still recording. "He's a cop," she shouted, her voice trembling but firm. "I know him. That's Officer Reed. He helped my brother last year." Her words hung in the air, a desperate plea to break through Sarah's panic. But Sarah didn't lower her weapon. Instead, she turned her head slightly, glaring at Lila. "Stay back. This doesn't concern you. It concerns all of us." Lila shot back, her courage surprising even herself. She was a barista, a single mom who'd grown up in Crestwood's toughest corners. She'd seen the police as both saviors and oppressors, depending on the day. But Marcus, she knew him. He'd talked her brother out of a bad decision, kept him from a record that could have ruined his life. She wasn't about to let this rookie destroy a good man. The standoff stretched on, seconds feeling like hours. Marcus's arms ached, but he kept them raised, his eyes locked on Sarah's. He knew the stats. Black officers were more likely to face suspicion, even from their own. He'd read the reports, seen the videos, felt the weight of it in his bones. But he'd never thought it would come to these, a gun in his face, held by someone wearing the same badge. "Sarah," he said, softer now, almost pleading, "you don't want to do this. You pull that trigger and it's not just my life that ends. It's yours too. Your career, your future gone. Think about it." He was reaching for her humanity, hoping it was still there, buried under the fear and the training and the lies she'd been fed about people who looked like him. Sarah's jaw tightened, her eyes narrowing. "Don't lecture me," she hissed. "I'm doing my job." But her voice wavered, and Marcus caught a crack in her armor. He pressed on, his words careful but firm. "Your job is to protect, not to destroy. You're pointing a gun at a man who spent a decade serving this city. You're pointing a gun at me because of what you think I am, not who I am." The words hit her like a slap. For a moment, her grip on the gun faltered, her eyes flicking to his badge again. The number 4729 gleamed in the streetlight, undeniable proof of his identity. But the moment was interrupted by the screech of tires. Another cruiser pulled up, lights flashing, and two more officers stepped out. Lieutenant Daniels, a grizzled veteran, and Officer Chun, a quiet but sharp rookie who'd trained with Marcus. "What the hell is going on here?" Daniels barked, his hand resting on his holster as he took in the scene. His eyes moved from Sarah's gun to Marcus's raised hands, and his face darkened. "Klein, lower your weapon. Now." Sarah hesitated, her breath ragged. He was acting suspicious," she stammered, her voice losing its edge. "No radio call, no backup." "He's Officer Reed." Chun cut in, his tone sharp. "You've seen him at roll call. Put the gun down, Sarah." His words were steady, but there was an undercurrent of disbelief, as if he couldn't fathom how this had happened. Daniels stepped closer, his voice low and dangerous. "Klein, you've got 3 seconds to holster that weapon, or I'll have your badge before you can blink." His authority was absolute, the kind forged by years on the force, years of navigating Crestwood's messy, divided streets. Sarah's hands trembled, but she finally lowered the gun, her face pale. Marcus exhaled, his arms dropping slowly, the tension in his body unwinding but not disappearing. Lila let out a shaky breath, her phone still recording, capturing every second of the truth. Daniels turned to Marcus, his expression a mix of anger and regret. "You okay, Reed?" he asked, his voice softer now, almost apologetic. Marcus nodded, but his eyes were hard. "I'm fine," he said, though he wasn't. Not really. The weight of what had just happened settled into his chest, heavy and unyielding. Chun approached Sarah, his face unreadable. "You're done here," he said quietly. "Hand over your badge and gun. You're on administrative leave until we sort this out." Sarah's eyes widened, her mouth opening to protest, but no words came. She unclipped her badge, her hands shaking, and placed it in Chen's outstretched hand. The metal glinted in the streetlight, a symbol of trust now tainted. Lila stepped forward, her phone lowered but her voice steady. "This is going viral," she said. Her eyes locked on Sarah. "People need to see this. They need to know what happened here." Her words were a promise, a warning, a call to action. Marcus met her gaze and nodded slightly, a silent acknowledgement of her courage. As Sarah was led to the cruiser, her head bowed, Marcus stood in the alley, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He'd survived, but the scars of this night would linger. Not just for him, but for Crestwood, for the force, for every person who'd ever felt the sting of being judged by their skin. The city was a tinderbox, and this incident was a match. But Marcus wasn't done. He'd keep wearing the badge, keep fighting for change, keep believing that one day, trust could be rebuilt. Because if he didn't, who would? The next morning, Lila's video hit the internet, racking up millions of views in hours. The headlines screamed across every news outlet. "Cop pulls gun on black officer, then loses her badge." The footage was raw, unfiltered, undeniable. It showed Sarah's fear, Marcus's calm, Lila's bravery. It showed a city on the edge, a system cracking under its own weight. Marcus sat in the precinct, his coffee cold, as Daniels briefed him on the fallout. Sarah was under investigation, her career likely over. The department was scrambling to respond, promising reforms, training, anything to quell the public's outrage. But Marcus knew promises weren't enough. He'd heard them before, seen them dissolve into nothing. "You did good out there, Reed," Daniels said, his voice gruff but sincere. "Kept your head, kept it from going south." Marcus nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. He thought of Lila, risking everything to record the truth. He thought of Sarah, a product of a broken system, now broken herself. He thought of Crestwood, a city that needed healing more than ever. He stood, adjusting his badge, the weight of it heavier than before. "I'm not done," he said, more to himself than to Daniels. "This city's worth fighting for." And with that, he walked out into the morning light, ready to face whatever came next, knowing that real change started with moments like this. The fallout from that night in the alley spread like wildfire. By noon, Crestwood was a city on edge, its streets buzzing with protests, news vans, and the hum of 1,000 conversations. Lila's video had become a rallying cry, shared across platforms, dissected on talk shows, and debated in living rooms. The image of Marcus Reed, hands raised, staring down Sarah Klein's gun, was seared into the public's stark reminder of how quickly trust could unravel. Marcus sat in his small apartment, the TV muted but flashing images of the protests. Signs reading "Justice for Reed" and "End Racial Profiling" bobbed above the crowd outside City Hall. He hadn't watched the video himself. He didn't need to. He'd lived it. Every second of that standoff was etched into his memory, the cold metal of his badge against his chest, the tremor in Sarah's hands, the weight of knowing how close he'd come to not walking away. His phone buzzed incessantly. Texts from colleagues, calls from reporters, messages from strangers calling him a hero, a sellout, a symbol. He ignored them all except one. A text from Lila. "You okay? People are listening now. Keep fighting." He stared at the words, a flicker of gratitude cutting through the numbness. Lila had risked her life to record the truth, and now she was out there, amplifying it, speaking at rallies, her voice raw but unwavering. Marcus wasn't sure he was ready to be a symbol. He joined the force to do the work, not to stand on a pedestal. But the work had changed. It wasn't just about patrolling streets or filing reports anymore. It was about confronting the rot at the core of the system he'd sworn to uphold, a system that had almost cost him his life. Across town, Sarah Klein sat in her apartment, staring at the empty space where her badge used to rest on the dresser. The department had suspended her pending a full investigation, but the public had already rendered its verdict. Her face was plastered across every screen, her name synonymous with failure, with prejudice, with everything wrong in Crestwood. She hadn't meant for it to happen like this. She'd been scared, alone in that alley, responding to a call with no backup. She'd seen Marcus's silhouette, heard the dispatcher's vague description of a suspicious figure, and her training had kicked in. Threat assessment. Neutralize. Survive. But she'd been wrong. Horribly, unforgivably wrong. And now her career was in ashes, her reputation destroyed. She'd grown up in a small town, where the world was neatly divided into good guys and bad. The academy had reinforced that, drilling into her that hesitation could mean death. But no one had taught her how to unlearn the biases she didn't even know she carried. No one had prepared her for the moment when fear turned a colleague into a target. Sarah's phone rang her mother again. She let it go to voicemail. She couldn't face the disappointment, the questions, the pity. Instead, she opened her laptop, scrolling through the comments on Lila's video. Some called for her arrest. Others said she was a victim of a broken system. A few, the loudest, spewed venom racial slurs, threats, hate. She closed the laptop, her hands shaking. She didn't recognize herself anymore. The woman who'd drawn her gun that night felt like a stranger. Meanwhile, Marcus was called into the precinct for a meeting with the chief, a man named Hargrove who'd been dodging the press all day. The chief's office was a fortress of polished wood and framed commendations, a stark contrast to the chaos outside. Hargrove leaned back in his chair, his face lined with exhaustion. "Reed, you're a good cop," he said, his voice gruff. "This thing gets a mess, but we'll handle it. Internal review, mandatory training, the works. We're gonna make this right." Marcus nodded, but his jaw tightened. He'd heard this before, promises of reform, of change, of "we'll do better." They were as hollow as the apologies that followed every incident like this. "With respect, sir," he said, his voice steady. "Training's not enough. Not when one of your officers pulls a gun on another because of the color of his skin. That's not a training issue. That's a culture issue." Hargrove's eyes narrowed, but he didn't argue. He knew Marcus was right. The department was a microcosm of Crestwood, divided, defensive, clinging to old ways even as the city demanded change. "What do you want, Reed?" he asked. "You want a public apology? A task force? Name it." "I want accountability," Marcus said. "Not just for Klein, for all of us, for the system that let this happen. For the fact that I have to walk into work every day wondering if my own people trust me." His words hung in the air, heavy with truth. Hargrove leaned forward, his hands clasped. "You've got my word," he said. "We'll start with Klein. Full investigation. No cover-ups. But I need you to stay in this, Reed. The city needs you." Marcus didn't respond. He wasn't sure he believed in the chief's promises anymore. But he believed in Crestwood. He believed in the kids he mentored, the families he protected, the community that had raised him. He'd keep going, not for Hargrove, but for them. Outside, the protests grew louder. Lila was at the front, holding a megaphone, her voice cutting through the noise. "This isn't just about one officer," she shouted to the crowd. "It's about a system that lets this happen over and over. Marcus Reed is one of us, and he almost paid the ultimate price for it. We demand change." The crowd roared, their signs waving, their anger and hope intertwined. Lila had become a voice for the voiceless, a role she hadn't expected but embraced. She'd spent years scraping by, working double shifts at the coffee shop, raising her son in a neighborhood where gunshots were lullabies. But that night in the alley had changed her. She'd seen Marcus's calm, his strength, and she'd seen Sarah's fear, her failure. She knew this wasn't just about one moment, it was about every moment that had led to it. As the sun set, Marcus joined the protest, not as a cop but as a citizen. He didn't wear his uniform, just a plain jacket and jeans. The crowd parted for him, some cheering, others watching in quiet respect. Lila handed him the megaphone, her eyes fierce. "Say something," she urged. "They need to hear from you." Marcus hesitated, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Then he took the megaphone, his voice steady but raw. "I've worn a badge for 10 years, he began. "I've served this city, risked my life for it. But that night I wasn't a cop to her. I was just a black man in an alley. And that's the problem. We're not just officers or civilians or black or white. We're people. And until we start seeing each other that way, nothing changes." The crowd erupted, their cheers echoing off the buildings. Marcus handed the megaphone back to Lila, his heart heavy but resolute. He didn't want to be a hero, but he'd be a voice, a bridge, a fighter for as long as it took. Weeks passed, and the investigation into Sarah Klein concluded. Her badge was revoked, her career over. She faced no criminal charges. There wasn't enough to prove intent, but the department made it clear she'd never wear a uniform again. Sarah left Crestwood quietly, her name a cautionary tale. Some saw her as a villain, others as a scapegoat. Marcus saw her as Bota person who'd made a terrible mistake, shaped by a system that had failed her as much as it had failed him. The department rolled out reforms. Bias training, community outreach, a new oversight board. Marcus was skeptical but involved, pushing for real change, not just optics. He met with Lila regularly, their unlikely partnership becoming a force for accountability. Together, they organized forums, bringing cops and civilians together to talk about trust, fear, and the future. Crestwood didn't heal overnight. The protests continued, the debates raged, and the wounds of division ran deep. But there were glimmers of hope. A new generation of officers, inspired by Marcus, began to question the old ways. Community leaders like Lila gained a platform, their voices amplified. And slowly, painfully, the city began to listen. Marcus stood in the same alley months later, alone, the street lamp still flickering. He traced his fingers over his badge, the metal cool against his skin. He thought of his father, a janitor who'd told him to be better than the world they give you. He thought of Lila, risking everything for the truth. He thought of Sarah, a cautionary tale of what happens when fear wins. He wasn't naive. Change was slow, messy, imperfect, but he'd keep fighting, because Crestwood was his home, and its people flawed, divided, resilient were worth it. He walked out of the alley, the city stretching before him, a canvas of struggle and possibility. What do you think? Where does justice lie in a moment like this? Share your thoughts on right, wrong, and the conflicts that shape our communities.